They lived as outcasts in the Vietnamese society, isolated by the community, treated as slaves, abused verbally and physically by the communists and the privileged, and sometimes even sold into prostitution as children. Their futures became strays and beggars were already determined for them, living out a roof over one's head and working vigorously in South Vietnam, only thinking of one thing, to go to America and look for their fathers. These outcasts were known as Amerasians, or as the xenophobic Vietnamese communists like to call them, Bui Doi, meaning the children of dust. Fortunately, U.S. Representative Robert J. Mrazek took a stand for Vietnamese Amerasians by authoring the Amerasian Homecoming Act of 1987, proving to be the most effective program in moving children and their families to the United States and providing them with opportunities that they would never have experienced otherwise. It is unknown how many Amerasians were born and abandoned in Vietnam between the years 1962 and 1975. Because of the country's traditional society, where it was better to marry a village dog than a rich man elsewhere, many births of Amerasians went unregistered. Many Amerasians were born as a result of longer-term loving relationships with U.S. servicemen while they were in Vietnam. However, these relationships usually ended when the serviceman finished his tour or duty and returned to the U.S. Once home, some men attempted to bring their lovers to America, but after Saigon fell to the communists, their partners were trapped in Vietnam. Most Amerasian children never knew their fathers, and their mothers were shunned for bearing half-breeds. In the communist eyes, they collaborated with the American enemy. As a result, they were denied social services and educational opportunities. Some mothers sent their children to live with family members, abandoned them, or sent them to orphanages. However, the communists closed many orphanages, and the abandoned Amerasians were sent to either war work farms or re-education camps. Within the camps, children were forced to deactivate mines with a knife while being told to harvest what their fathers had sown.
I remember a communist woman walking down the street, and she traveled from Hanoi to Saigon. And she said, "Oh my God, what a beautiful child." And she would come in and touch me, and her comrade was screaming at her and tell her, "That's the product of American. That all evil in there. Don't touch it, it might bite you." And I remember her recoil from me like I'm all of a sudden become poison to her.
At first, neither Vietnam nor the United States wanted these Amerasian children. The two governments had a feud centered on the issue as to who was ultimately responsible for these children for years. The care and welfare of these unfortunate children has never been and is not now considered an area of government responsibility. Our society does not need these bad elements. The fate of these children suddenly changed with the help of an American photojournalist, a New York congressman, 4 high school students, and an Amerasian boy in Vietnam. On a fateful day in 1985, Newsday photojournalist Audrey Tiernan was working on an assignment in Ho Chi Minh City when she met a boy named Le Van Minh. "I thought it was a dog cat. I looked down and there was Minh. It broke my heart." At age 10, Minh's mother kicked him out of the house. As a beggar on the streets, it was incredibly difficult to get around due to his twisted spine and deformed legs. He could barely walk. The photograph Tiernan shot of Minh gained international attention, including a group of 4 high school students from Huntington High in New York. Touched by the photo, the students decided to bring Minh to the United States for medical attention. They collected 27,000 signatures on a petition from people in 27 states and 3 foreign countries. They also asked their congressman, Robert J. Mrazek, for support. However, due to a relationship between the United States and Vietnam, immigration was completely halted. When Mrazek gave the students the bad news, one of them exclaimed, "You're quitting before you even start." I went back to Washington feeling very guilty. The students had come to see me thinking their congressman could change the world, and I, in effect, had told them I couldn't. Congressman Mrazek then decided to take a stand and contact the U.S. State Department, hoping the Vietnam delegation to the United Nations would make an exception for Minh. Months later, he found a senior Vietnamese official that agreed to help, and he flew to Ho Chi Minh City in May 1987. Upon landing in Vietnam, Amerasian children surrounded Mrazek, some calling him Daddy. The phrase that he kept hearing from those who spoke English was, "I want to go to the land of my father." He was moved by the horrid conditions that the children were living in. It just hit me. We weren't talking about just the one boy. There are lots of these kids, and they were painful reminders to the Vietnamese of the war and all it had cost them. I thought, well, we're bringing one back. Let's bring them all back, at least the ones who want to come. When Mrazek and Min arrived in New York, 200 students from Huntington High greeted them and gave Min a stuffed lion to symbolize his courage for surviving in the streets of Ho Chi Minh City. Min's case garnered much attention and contributed to the eventual departure of the remaining Amerasian children in Vietnam. The Amerasian Homecoming Act of 1987, authored and sponsored by Mrazek, had difficulties being passed. The Reagan administration, along with Senate, House Judiciary Committees, and the immigration subcommittees, opposed it. They did not want the Amerasian issues to be separate from other issues involving immigration. In the end, Mrazek evaded normal congressional procedures and slipped his 3-page act into a 1,191-page appropriations bill, which Congress quickly approved and President Reagan signed in December 1987. Implemented in March 1989, the new law enabled Vietnamese Amerasians and their immediate family to immigrate to the United States. They had to have the slightest hint of a Western appearance, approved medical exams, and interviews to be accepted. They received refugee benefits such as cash and medical assistance, then flew to the Philippines to receive language training and cultural orientation. From there, they were flown to cluster sites located in the United States. The success of the Amerasian Homecoming Act has been debated. Not all Amerasians were informed about the act and could not leave Vietnam. Furthermore, other barriers included costs such as transportation to Ho Chi Minh City, government papers to leave the country, bribing officials to be placed on the interview list, and altering photographs and other documents. Another issue was fraud. The most common type of fraud involved fake families, non-Amerasians claiming that they were relatives of the Amerasians. Some Amerasians agreed to be bought by the Vietnamese because their fake families would assist paying the expense to immigrate to America. However, once the families left Vietnam, the relatives would often abandon their benefiting Amerasian. Because of fraud, the program ended in 1995, leaving a number of true Amerasians in Vietnam. While it was true that Amerasian lives were now better, it was difficult to blend into mainstream America. They fully expected support from the Vietnamese American community, but were disappointed when the community initially looked down on them, thinking that their mothers were prostitutes, and therefore brought a bad image to the American public. This led many Amerasians to believe that they did not belong anywhere. I ran into a lot of racism, because being mixed race, it's hard to find an identity. Another problem that Mrazek's ads caused was regarding citizenship, which was not guaranteed. Since many Amerasians did not attend school in Vietnam, they came to America illiterate, making it more difficult to pass the citizenship test. They could not vote, risked deportation, and received limited government aid. Furthermore, most Amerasians wanted to find their fathers, but only 33% knew their name, 22% attempted contacting their father, and only 3% successfully reunited with their father. Despite the negatives, countless lives were saved due to Mrazek's efforts. Most Amerasians received an education, gained greater earning potential, and lived a healthy life. Furthermore, discrimination faded as time passed, and communication between both the Vietnamese and Americans improved. As they assimilated into America, they became productive and contributing members of society. Many became successful business owners and held high-paying jobs. Some became well-known entertainers such as Randy Tuan Tran and Louis Lu Quoc Viet. Some created positive programs revolving around Amerasians, such as Operation Reunite. Congressman Robert J. Mrazek's substantial efforts to pass the Amerasian Homecoming Act of 1987 has had a powerful and positive impact on thousands of Amerasians in the American society. Amerasians finally achieved their dream of a better life, and the contributions made by these individuals are immense and widespread. 25 years after the act was implemented, almost 100,000 people have immigrated from communist Vietnam to the U.S., the land of opportunity. Furthermore, the shame and struggles from being an Amerasian has diminished, and they are now proud of their identity. Due to Mrazek's stand in the Amerasian Homecoming Act, these survivors seized the opportunities that America has provided, enabling them to celebrate their accomplishments as a unique immigrant community.
I'm so happy with my family now. All my children, they listen to me, listen to my husband, and keep study, hard study. I'm so happy now.